Looming climate catastrophe. Extinction in 9 years. That is the headline of the article that I decide to read just before going to sleep. No sleepy time tea for me, no. I end the long day with the news of the Earth's and in turn humanity's certain demise. The article begins. Reports from the Arctic are getting pretty grim. The latest, from a blog called Arctic News, warns that by 2026, that's just 9 years from now, warming above the Arctic Circle could be so extreme that a massively disrupted and weakened jet stream could lead to a global temperature rise so severe that a massive extinction event, including humans, could result. End of quote. Pleasant dreams. As we do every year, come April, we will celebrate Earth Day here at All Souls. But as our ministry theme this month is stewardship, I thought that stewardship of the earth would be a good topic, not knowing then what this past week would bring. The confirmation of a climate change denier to head up the Environmental Protection Agency. To remind, these are the folks who tend to the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act and the Endangered Species Act. Apparently, he'll be serving the EPA only through December of 2018 if the bill H.R. 861 is passed into law. The bill, in its entirety, says this. The Environmental Protection Agency shall terminate on December 31st, 2018. The bill was introduced by Florida Republican Matt Gaetz and co-sponsored by representatives from Kentucky, Mississippi, and Georgia. As one writer said, the bill doesn't bother with anything like wondering what happens to the data that the agency collects or the enforcement the agency carries out. It doesn't sweat the details of employees or contracts. There's nothing about what happens to the Clean Air Act or the Clean Water Act or the Endangered Species Act or anything at all, just terminated. So ends the quote. Sadly, this sermon's timing couldn't be better because politically, things couldn't be worse for the environment. Now, when I preach, I try very, very hard to move toward a more hopeful place because that's what being a person of faith is about. It's about keeping hope kindled. That's particularly challenging this week as we are likely feeling like we are up the soon-to-be horrifyingly polluted creek. So what's a faithful person? What's a faith community to do? First, we are reminded that the grim news is hardly new. 10 years ago, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change issued an equally grim report that warned that if steps weren't taken quickly to reduce human-made emissions, a third of the world's plant and animal species would become extinct by the end of the century. The report warned, you may remember this, about rising tides and seas could threaten some of the world's busiest seaports. Soon thereafter, The Day, our local paper, published an editorial that stated that the government must follow through with an aggressive, clean energy campaign that engages the public. The American public, The Day editor said, has demonstrated in the past its willingness to make sacrifices for important causes, and with the right leadership, it can and do so again. Ends the quote. So there are certainly many people and institutions who have been convinced of the urgency of the situation, and so those people, meaning you and me, and those institutions, meaning All Souls for one, must work harder than ever to do more than we ever thought possible. And I know I keep saying that from this pulpit. Bill McKibben says, "It means that the changes we make in our homes and churches and as individuals and congregations, vital as they are, can't deliver the speed or magnitude of change that will slow climate change. It means that we need to change light bulbs, but we also need to change laws. It means that Washington, after 2 decades, I love this quote, a very successful bipartisan effort to do nothing, needs to spin on a dime." So says McKibben. We have absolutely no indication that there will be any dime spinning anytime soon, right? And so our resolve must be greater than ever. And so let's pause right here for a moment. This would be a good time, I think, to talk about faith communities and politics, because mixing the two is not going to go away, nor has there ever been a time when faith communities have not commented on the politics of the day in pursuing our moral vision for our country? It's just that faith communities dramatically differ from each other in our interpretations of what constitutes moral, right? And we likely differ as dramatically in our interpretations of what constitutes political. So let's talk about this for a second. Politics is the practice or profession of conducting political affairs, says dictionary.com. The Unitarian Universalist Association posts a monograph on their website called "The Real Rules: Congregations and the IRS Guidelines on Advocacy, Lobbying, and Elections." I have read it carefully, and I hope that the opening paragraph will put to rest whatever concerns you may have. This is what it says. "Religious individuals and groups have played a prophetic role in public life throughout history by calling attention to oppression, demanding change, and holding leaders and institutions accountable for their actions and policies. While this is still true in the U.S. today, too many people are under the false impression that religious organizations cannot have a voice in the public policy arena as a result of the Constitution's separation of church and state, or because of the IRS regulations. In reality, there are many activities that any religious group can do without jeopardizing its nonprofit tax-exempt status. There are restrictions on certain kinds of political actions, but the range of what is acceptable is wide enough to exhaust the time and resources of any congregation without crossing any regulatory lines.
Amen.
Amen. So we have not come near to crossing any regulatory lines here at All Souls. But crossing regulatory lines is not really where most of the tension lies. The tension lies when our words and actions become more about the civic and less about the spiritual, the meaning-making. This tension is what we need to tend to at All Souls and to be mindful of. Tom Shade spoke of this tension, if indirectly, when he preached here in January. He reminded us of our 7 principles, pointing out that these principles really do outline a vision of the world as it should be, in our estimation. Fair, just, equitable, honoring the inherent worth and dignity of all people, and honoring, for today's purposes, the interdependent web of which we are a part. What stands between the world as it is and the world that we covenant to create together is only one thing: oppression. oppression. And to dismantle all sorts of oppressions, one must engage with the systems that have the power either to dismantle or to conserve those systems. One must engage in the practice of conducting political affairs, politics. And so, as Unitarian Universalists have done for generations, All Souls will continue to engage in the effort to dismantle oppression so that our vision of a world with a moral center in which all people are honored for their inherent worth and dignity may not only be realized, but will thrive. And undoubtedly, mistakes will be made. We may land too heavily on the civic without enough emphasis on or connection to the spiritual, but we will learn from that. Perhaps some souls wondered about reading from Coretta Scott King's letter to Strom Thurmond last week. After the fact, I too wondered. I didn't wonder if I violated any regulations in choosing to use that reading as an example of agape at all for a second. I didn't. It wasn't. I did wonder if by doing so that I landed too heavily on the civic and too lightly on the spiritual. And that's the struggle. Not whether All Souls will lose our nonprofit status if we have a postcard writing event that criticizes the government. Not organizing buses to go to Boston to protest what's happening in our country today. We're committed to doing so exactly by our principles. So there's that. That's the end of that pause. We'll go back now to the matter at hand. So now, as our seventh principle is so deeply compromised, let's consider how faith communities may respond. Bill McKibben has been thinking and writing about climate change for over 25 years. The man is serious. He is the one who got the Step It Up campaign going. You may remember this. It took place several years ago, and over 1,000 communities throughout the country participated. You may remember this effort as a few local congregations took part. The campaign was launched in order to nudge the Congress to do something quickly, something concrete about carbon emissions. Faith communities displayed and then took photographs of banners that said, "Step it up, Congress. Cut carbon by 80% by 2050. Your move." And they would take pictures and share this on social media. In writing about these rallies, McKibben indicated that they would be taking place in town halls and League of Women Voters meetings, City Hall plazas, and church steps. And when asked why church steps, he said, because to put it crudely, politicians pay attention to people on church steps. Let's consider his strategy in light of our UU commitment. What is the religious response to the matter of environmental justice? Why should we be at the forefront of this movement and on the church steps? This is what he says. If you care about social justice, this is the biggest battle we have ever faced. If you care about creation, then get to work. If you care about the future, about 10,000 generations yet unborn, then this is your cause. If you care about the selfish individualism that has come to define too much of our culture, then this is a chance to act, he says. This movement will force us to answer deep questions about what the good life really is. 80% less fossil fuel use means a different America. Perhaps one where people depend more on their neighbors than we do now. The church, which can still throw out there some goal for human life other than accumulation, must be involved in the search in what comes next. McKibben says. And to that I will add, we have bought the right light bulbs, we recycle faithfully. Many of us have tried in our personal lives to decrease our imprint on the earth, a whole host of ways. But it's not enough. In this political climate that is hostile to the environment's good health, we need to be more creative in order to be more effective. And we're in a good position to be more creative. Consider this. In general, Unitarian Universalists are deeply committed to interfaith work as we approach justice issues. We get excited about interfaith-based organizing. The most recent example, of course, is what? Say it out loud. Refugees, specifically, right? Start fresh, right? Start fresh. We have working relationships and more, we have friendships now with other faith communities. And as there is a wide range of faith traditions at that table, we are well positioned to harness that power already in place around environmental justice. And let's do some work within our walls. Through a great deal of work by a few leaders, Lee Boltz, Tracy Rose, Jonathan Harger, many others who contributed time and effort, in 2009, All Souls was named as a green sanctuary. I think this would be a good time to revisit the commitments that got us that distinction. And so if you are interested in reviving the green sanctuary effort, get in touch with me. And as individuals, we can push back on the effort to eliminate the EPA. In all of your efforts this week, I know you are calling, I know that you are sending postcards, I know that you are writing letters and emails and signing petitions. And perhaps you may also call your representative and tell them to oppose H.R. 861 because you believe in the interdependent web of which we all exist, and that the EPA plays an essential part as a steward of the earth. These indeed, and all of our efforts, reflect our religious imperative to work on behalf of and on solidarity with the natural world. So recently, I quoted St. Francis, a man we typically envision standing where? Next to the bird bath, right? With all the birds sweetly tweeting away. He is the saint that Christians and Catholics in particular often associate with the environmental justice movement. Lovely and as poetic as that image may be, St. Francis was a tough cookie. You start a new and radical religious order, devote yourself to the poor, cast off all of your possessions, and ask others to do the same. And we can assume that this man was as steely as he was gentle and kind. And we must call up that same brand of resolve. Gentle, kind, steely. Our world, the earth we share with our kin everywhere, is depending on such resolve. We are stewards of the earth. Our Mother Earth, Brother Sun, Sister Moon lie in wait for our support. And there's plenty to do, and you know what? When you're doing plenty, you don't have time to feel hopeless. Take heart, friends. And let's take that heart to the church steps. Amen.
Amen.